Good day, everybody. People ask me all the time how I became a Cubs fan, even though I've lived in the Denver area my whole life. As I'm showing you an overhead shot of Wrigley Field, well, it was because back before the Rockies came into being, the Cubs were on TV all the time on the superstation WGN, and listening to the late great Harry Carey as well as Steve Stone calling the games. Coming home every day, or not every day, but a fair share of the time from school to catch the end of the Cubs game, or coming home from daycare. Just fun time, and the Cubs were the first team I really watched, so Cubs are in many ways responsible for my baseball fandom. And here's their famous scoreboard, opened in the 30s, and still that old school board still there all these years later. And then the recent World Series, as I know I'm showing you some of the floor here, but the recent World Series, which was a great one between the Dodgers and Blue Jays, Dodgers winning a classic 7th game in 11 innings. Though it does not change my current feelings about the new rules in baseball, I know that's not popular for me not to like them, but I'm still not a big fan of that. Players and owners hate each other. I mean, still a lot wrong with baseball, but yes, Game 7 of the recent World Series was great, but it also got me to thinking about the Cubs' most recent World Series title in 2016, as I show you little poster, little picture I have of the 1907 Cubs winning the World Series. This was their first title. And then, after winning it again in 1908, as most of you know, Cubs didn't win again until 2016. And here's some pictures I have there. One of the Cub games at Wrigley Field in the World Series. And then, of course, the wild celebration. And the night, like most Cub fans, I'll never ever forget. November 2nd into November 3rd, 2016. Game 7 of the World Series in Cleveland, and how anxious I was during the day and how incredibly nervous I was during Game 7. Cubs hold a 5-1 lead in the bottom of the 5th. Kyle Hendricks, the starting pitcher, is cruising along. Issues a 2-out walk, and manager Joe Maddon brings in Jon Lester, who had trouble pitching and throwing to bases, had trouble pitching with runners on base and throwing to bases. So after a ground ball that he couldn't field, catcher David Ross makes a throwing error, runners at second and third. And then a wild pitch scores not 1 but 2 runs, it's 5-3. It's like, oh great. Then the aforementioned David Ross homering in the top of the 6th. Give the Cubs a 6-3 lead. They hold it into the bottom of the 8th. With 2 outs, Jon Lester gives up an infield single, and I wasn't sure that was the time to pull him. But Cubs manager Joe Maddon disagreed. Brought in Aroldis Chapman, who'd thrown 2 2/3 innings in Game 5. The Cubs win over Cleveland to keep the series going, and then the previous night in Game 6, even though the Cubs were winning handily, Chapman still got an inning and a third, which was more than he was accustomed to. The 2 2/3 obviously was, but then an inning and a third after that. Certainly more than he was accustomed to, and it showed in Game 7. Giving up a double to Brandon Guyer to score a run to make it 6-4. And then a moment that still gets talked about to this day most everywhere. Rajai Davis, not known as a home run hitter for Cleveland, fouling off pitch after pitch. And then finally hitting the game-tying 2-run home run. And if you've ever heard the Matt Vasgersian call on MLB International, I'm not big on screaming calls, but it certainly captured the moment. And Joe Buck did too on Fox Sports. That call a lot more coherent, by the way. So the home run by Davis ties the game at 6 into the 9th. Heart just about stops when that happens. But the Cubs get the lead runner to third in the ninth inning. But of course can't score. Javier Baez couldn't get a bunt down. And then Dexter Fowler grounding out on what was, in fairness, a good play by Francisco Lindor. And then in the bottom of the ninth, kudos to Aroldis Chapman. After giving up the tying home run in the eighth, could have very easily given up, but he didn't. Pitched a 1-2-3 ninth. Then came the rain delay. Jason Hayward calling the team meeting, as the Cubs apparently seemed defeated at the time, but Hayward rallying the crew together. And then in the top of the 10th, after a Kyle Schwarber single, his pinch runner Albert Almora taking second on a fly ball to deep center. And then Almora scoring on the base hit, the double by Ben Zobrist. Cubs add another run, they're up 8-6. And had the bases loaded with one out, looked like they'd break the game wide open right then and there. But of course it wasn't going to be that easy. Cubs couldn't score anymore. And then in the bottom of the 10th, when reliever Carl Edwards Jr. replaced Chapman and got the first 2 outs, I had a hunch it wouldn't be quite that easy either. And it wasn't. Brandon Guyer drew a 2-out walk, took second on defensive indifference, and then Rajai Davis yet again delivered a big hit. Not another tying home run, but another big hit. Drove in Guyer. It's 8-7. Tying runs at first, winning runs at the plate. It's a wonder I didn't faint by that time. So here comes reliever Mike Montgomery, facing Michael Martinez, who was one of the last players off the bench for Cleveland. But given the way baseball can be when the least expected heroes can deliver, after Rajai Davis already had a couple of times, I was hardly counting chickens. And on a 0-1 pitch on what was essentially a swinging bunt by Martinez, Chris Bryant charging the ground ball on the wet infield, his foot slipping as he got to the ball and threw it to first. But Bryant got the throw off. It was in time. And it set off that scene. The scene 108 years in the making. The Cubs finally winning it all just after midnight in Cleveland on November 3rd, 2016. I mean, I've had some fine nights in sports, but that one, the fact that the Cubs won the World Series, something myself and many others weren't sure they'd ever see. An amazing night. I didn't fall asleep till well after 3 o'clock in the morning that night, into the next morning. Just amazing, and I know I've been more nostalgic about baseball than ever, and again, can't deny this most recent World Series was certainly terrific between the Dodgers and Blue Jays, but it just made me think of that November night in Cleveland when the Cubs finally took it all over a Cleveland team that still hasn't won since 1948, and I will admit, unless, of course, they're playing the Cubs in the World Series, I would like to see Cleveland win it all someday. And one more thing. In the moments after the World Series, while I was certainly celebrating, I also thought about a lot of people who didn't get to see it, such as Cubs greats, the aforementioned announcer Harry Carey, another announcer Jack Brickhouse, Ron Santo, the great third baseman who became a broadcaster, Ernie Banks, Mr. Cub, Let's Play 2. And then I thought about all 4 of my grandparents, and granted none of them were Cub fans, but still they were all born well after 1908 and were all deceased by the time the 2016 World Series had happened. Just an amazing night when the Cubs finally won the World Series. Just after midnight in Cleveland, November 3rd, 2016. Thought I'd share my memories with you here today. Thanks to all of you for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Good day, everyone.